And I hope just to definitely get out of this is to learn more and to accomplish my goal is 1,000 doors by the end of the year. That's
Ooh,
my goal.
I like
That's
it.
my goal. Yep, that's the goal. And that's why I joined this mastermind. Because that's the
Hairy and
goal.
audacious.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's make it happen for you. Welcome
Absolutely.
aboard.
Welcome.
Thank you guys.
All right, so not gonna wait for anyone else. We're gonna jump in and start going over. I guess we're gonna say this is what where are we? Part 6? I think this is part 6 of due diligence. So we're gonna continue down the list of what we were going over from last week or this week, but Monday on this due diligence checklist. So let's jump in. Now, we went over a lot of this. We got all the way up to loss to lease detailed by the unit on the management reports. So as a refresher, this due diligence checklist is not the same as the step-by-step acquisition guide that we went over last time. Obviously, it's just different things that it's going over with the step-by-step guide, but also the step-by-step guide was very chronologically in order of like do this and then do this and step by step, literally exactly what to do. So this is not necessarily in order. You don't really have to get bookkeeping reports before you get leasing reports. And you'll notice that some things are slightly repetitive just to try to make sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted and you actually get all the data that you need. Just because I know for us, we'll go down the list and we'll get like 50% or 75% of like all the leases. And then someone will check off the fact that we've gotten all the leases because we met maybe the lender's requirement of leases, but not like our requirement. And so then we just like to have some additional repetitive, have it in there somewhere else saying we need to get the leases. So it's like, oh yeah, we got part of the leases, but not all the leases. Let's make sure we go back and have all, 100 or however many leases that we need. So that's just an example, but you'll notice there's a little bit of repetitiveness to this due diligence checklist. But honestly, what we usually do with this checklist is just give it to the broker or give it to the seller and say, hey, here's all the stuff I need. Get it to me. And then once you get, I have all of the documents received, that's when our due diligence time frame will actually begin or commence. So jumping into today with taxes, number one, property tax bill and assessments. So what we've been doing is just kind of talking about what it is that we need and then really why we need it and how we can get it and some of the deeper detail behind maybe even the reasoning for it. So property tax bill and assessments, you're going to want to get this just strictly because you're going to want to know what they're currently paying on their property taxes. So you can always go to the tax assessor website. Actually, didn't we go over this last time? Didn't we go over property taxes?
We went all the way up to staff payroll, section 12.
Did we do general admission? I don't remember doing general admission. But I do remember talking about property tax bill. We'll do general admission, then we'll go from there. Apologies. General admission, copies of current service contracts and leases. This is just you're going to obviously want a copy of any kind of service contract or lease that you have set up or that the current seller technically has set up with any of the other third-party individuals that they've partnered with on this asset. So whether that's landscaping, or maybe they've got like a trash contract with a specific company, or heck, maybe they've even got a contract with like a utility company and you could use a different utility company because maybe that market has a bunch of them. So maybe utilizing just a different utility company will save money on, on expenses. Or maybe they've got a service contract with the Wi-Fi, like they've got an internet contract. Or I've seen this before, and this is Stone Age, but cable TV. Some people have cable TV contracts where they're actually running cable to each unit. It's kind of funny to see, but when you're investing in C-class assets, that's what you get. So all different kinds of service contracts, and you're just going to want a copy of what those are because you're going to want to make the determination of whether or not you want to keep that contract in service, whether or not you want to continue to actually work with that third-party person, or that third party company, because maybe you have some other ancillary or secondary setup for, say, landscaping or something, where you're going to be able to chop like your landscaping cost in half from what the current seller is paying, because you have a really great connection with some local landscaping company who does really great work. It's a buddy of a buddy, or whatever the case is, and you can just get a better deal. So why not go that route? So you want to see how much time is left on the contract of the current landscaping contract, if there is one at all, or if they're just going month to month. And if there is it something that you can get out of? And if not, that needs to be a part of your business plan. You need to throw that into what the pro forma projections are going to be of where you're actually going to be able to take the asset. Same thing for list of memberships and licenses. Licenses for sure. Memberships being like if they're a member of any specific thing. I also quantify memberships as kind of like subscriptions. So if the property itself is actually subscribed to a specific leasing software and it's not necessarily ownership of the PM company, or if they're subscribed to some other ancillary software or Zillow for marketing or something that we can easily take over, transition, and utilize ourselves because it's ownership of the actual asset. And then as far as licenses, you're going to want make sure that they just have a business license more so than anything, because you're going to have to get your own business license with that county or with that state when you actually take over the asset. But you just want to double check and make sure that they have been following within the guidelines of the state or county in general, and that they have those business licenses in hand. So that's really what you wanted to get there. Staff payroll, list of staff names, employee history, salaries, benefits. I want to get all of the information that I can possibly get from staff data. So you've got your primary, lead leasing agent. Then you've got maybe another ancillary or secondary leasing agent that handles, just leasing and doesn't do any of the higher up stuff. Then you got your maintenance technician, then maybe you got a part-time maintenance tech, and you got all these different pieces of the puzzle in terms of your staff. And so just making sure that obviously the most basic sense, you're getting at least the staff's names, first and last. And then preferably their employee history, what their current salary is, which should be in the T12, but even more granularized. I would love to get that broken out and say, how much is this person actually getting paid? What is their salary? What is their benefits? And what have they done before this? Because you're going to want to make a determination. You're going to have to make a determination of whether or not you want to keep that staff actually on site. And again, this is going to be a topic that's fairly large that we're going to talk about another time. All the deep detailed specifics of how to go through the process of actually underwriting or doing your due diligence on a PM company. But nonetheless, this is information you're definitely going to want on the current staff. Same thing for list of free units, employee model. So list of free units is basically saying if there's a model unit that they just keep as a model unit that they fully furnished, and that's always the unit that stays vacant so that people can tour it and walk it or whatever, just knowing what unit that is and thinking about whether or not you actually want to keep it as a model, or if you want to transition it into like a short-term rental since it's already fully furnished, if you wanted to do it that way. Or does the furniture actually come with the sale when you sell, or are they trying to take the furniture with them when you sell it? As far as the model goes. And then the employee is like, is there an on-site employee actually living at the property? And if so, are they living there for free or at some kind of discounted rate? And if so, what's that discount? Or what unit are they living in that they're living in for free? Just making sure you get a list to determine, one, how many there are, but two, what you plan on doing once you take over. Because if it's an employee you want to keep, you determine you really like this employee, then you may have to build into the budget not having that one unit rented or not making any money on it, and just keeping the setup the same way, where you're allowing that person to live for free and just paying them a little bit less on their salary because they don't have to worry about living expenses, except for maybe like utilities. Like, hey, if you just pay utilities, you can stay here for free or at a discounted rate, whatever you want to do. You can switch things up. But nonetheless, if that's the case, then you may have to build that into the budget. And if it's not the case, then you'll have another unit coming online that you didn't otherwise know you had, another value add, if they move out and you're able to rent it to standard tenant. Utility bills, last 3 years by month and account number. I would love to get last 3 years utility bills, but it's not always the case. Sometimes you're lucky to even get the last 6 months of utility bills. If I can at least get 12 months, I'm pretty happy. Same thing with the T12, right? You want to get at least the last 12 months of income and expenses. So it's the same thing for the utility bills, but I want to get the actual bills themselves because they're going to give you the total amount that they spent or whatever. But I want to see the bill because I want to know how much actual power was used, how much gas was used, how much water was used. And I want to see the fluctuation through the bills over the course of the entire 12-month time frame to see if there's any large movements or inflection points between one bill to the next. Like if 1 month, in the month of May, let's say the water bill is $4,000 a month, and all January, February, March, April, all those months were $4,000 a month. Suddenly we get to the month of June and it's like 10 grand a month for the water bill. And then it's 10 grand a month for like 2 or 3 months. And here I am trying to buy it in the summer month and like, it's still at 10 grand. I'm like, how did y'all used to be paying $4,000? Now you're paying 10 grand. We can't account this to just increased occupancy because there's no way it would have gone up that much because your occupancy when you were at 4,000 was at 95% and you've only gone up an extra 2% since then. So 2% isn't going to use that much extra water, which means there's probably a leak somewhere. You need to figure out where that leak is. That could be a part of your negotiation, making sure that putting it on the seller to actually fix, repair, whatever that leak before closing. Be a part of your, I don't know, seller concession or retrade or whatever if you get to that point. Now, typically, if it's fairly small, then we're not going to retrade over it. But something that you definitely want to be aware of, like, why are we paying so much more on the utility bill? Because for all you know, when you look at what their total T12 bill is, if you just say, if they just show you, well, for the full year, we paid $120,000, whatever, for water. It's like, okay, well, I'm just going to estimate that you take that and divide that by 12, and that's what you've been paying per month. I mean, let's say that's 10 grand a month, but in all actuality, for the first couple of months, it was only a couple $1,000 until it skyrocketed, and you're never going to know that until you get the bills. So getting the bills, nonetheless, is going to give you some more insight into whether or not there is problem. Same thing for gas, right? If gas is significantly more expensive, there's probably a gas leak somewhere that you're definitely going to want to get fixed super quick. And then as far as electricity, I just want to see the trends of when and why people spend a ton more money. Like if you're in a coastal region like we are, you know, the electricity bill is probably going to skyrocket in the summertime because people are going to have their AC running 24/7. Now that's if it's an electrical HVAC unit. If it's a gas powered HVAC unit, then the gas bill is probably going to go up. So how can I adjust my business plan to make sure that I am charging my utilities, implementing my RUBS model to account for those shifts throughout the year? And you're not going to be able to do that unless you have a deeper understanding of what that is from the bills. Number 2, all utility names, contact information, account number. That should be on the bill, honestly, but put it on there nonetheless in case it's not. I want the contact information of who I need to contact if there is a problem at the utility company, or who can come out and fix it. If they're going to pay, like if the utility company is going to pay for it, come out and fix it for free, or just whatever. Want their contact information, the name of the actual company, of course, and then the account number that I'm going to be taking over for these assets. And probably if everything's individually metered, you're going to have 100 different account numbers. So just having all that squared away, making sure that's a part of the transition when your new PM takes over, or same PM, however you decide to structure that. List of all current telephone numbers in use at site. That's just something I'm going to want to know specifically for the property management, business. Are we going to want to use the same phone number? If so, I need to make sure that I get the same phone number and have that transition over with the sale, and that we have the actual phone or whatever connected to that phone number starting from day one upon takeover, upon the transition, so that we can start taking calls, right? Start leasing up or doing whatever it is that we got to do. Most of the time we don't take over the telephone number. Nonetheless, I still want to know what numbers they are currently using. But most of the time our PM has their own phone or their own number or something that they bring with them when they come and transition and take over. And then list of utility deposits or bonds, more so deposits than anything. So sometimes, actually more than often, you'll actually have to put a deposit down with the utility company, and it's a deposit that you can typically get back. So probably depending on who's owning the asset at the time, that'll depend on who actually receives the deposit. The deposit isn't always small. Sometimes, a water company, if if there's multiple water company options, which 9 times out of 10 there's not, but if there is, you know, you may have one water company that's had you pay like a $10,000 or $20,000 deposit just to get out there and start everything up. And then they'll pay the deposit back after like 6 months of use or after 12 months of use, you know, they give it back to you. Or I couldn't tell you exactly how it works because every utility company is totally different, but some utility companies do charge a deposit. So you just want to make sure, was there a deposit paid? If so, how much was it? Who was it paid to? And what's the actual like policy for the deposit? Am I supposed to get that back? Am I not supposed to get that back? Is that going to go back to the seller? All stuff you can add into your financial projections. Repairs and maintenance, last 3 years, work order history log. Most of the time we don't get 3 years. Most of the time we're lucky to get 12 months. And some people don't even have that because they're just very not organized. But if I could get the last 3 years work order history, that would be fantastic. Now, when I say work order history, I mean like standard maintenance. So this isn't necessarily CapEx. This is what is all of the maintenance calls that you've had over the last 3 years? What is the cost of what you had to do? What did you actually have to do? What units were those done to? When were those done? How often were they done? You know, because then you're able to see a full 3-year trajectory of like this one tenant consistently calls every other month about her dang hot water heater, and no one has yet replaced the hot water heater. I'm probably going to need to go in there and replace this dang hot water heater because she's always calling and we're always going in there and spending a couple $100 every now and then to fix it. So getting that work order history log is going to give you a really detailed understanding of what's going on with that property, specifically with deferred maintenance, like if there is any deferred maintenance. And if there is, you may not even actually see what it is because they haven't done the work order on it, right? They haven't actually done the maintenance on it. So then what you're going to want to see is you're going to want to see all of the actual work orders. So, or the logs that tenants have put into their system. If they have a system, if they don't have a system, then you have nothing to look at. But if they've got a PM system that where people can like go in and automatically say something, or you call and people put it in a system somewhere, the PM, then I would love to see, you know, how much deferred maintenance is there actually, you know, how many like backlogged work orders do you guys have that I'm going to have to take over as soon as I get into this? And that's also going to be something that you're going to find out if they don't already have that on hand. It's something you're going to find out when you do your on-site physical inspection and you hire that third-party company to go through and look at everything. They're going to tell you everything that needs fixed and replaced and what hasn't seen love for a while. And you're going to have a deep understanding of that. But if they can also give you this as well, then that's just two pieces of documentation that you can utilize to make a even better, more educated decision on what to replace and what things are going to cost. And so on and so forth. So the work order history log definitely helps in terms of kind of like ongoing maintenance and seeing why maybe the maintenance price is so high. Why are we spending so much on ongoing maintenance? Why is deferred maintenance so high? You know, can we, when I come in and I take over this asset, can I take some of this cash and put it over to capital improvements? You know, have they maybe just been mismanaging or misrepresenting what these actual line items are? You know, all these line items right here should have been CapEx, but they're saying they're a part of the work order. So I know immediately, as soon as going in, I can take a lot of these, immediately put them below the line and increase my NOI day one without even doing anything, just because they suck at accounting. So all great stuff to check and to see. Same thing for list of recurring maintenance problems. A lot of that's going to be a part of number one when you get that work order history log, or maybe they have a separate list. I don't know. Never hurts to ask. And then the schedule of capital improvements over the last 2 years. This is something that I ask from all this stuff is something I ask from everyone, but the capital improvements over the last 2 years is something most people can actually give you. At least they give you the capital improvements of what they've done since they've owned it. So I really want to know, have you replaced the roof in the last 2 years? Have you done all the HVACs? Have you done flooring in all the units? Have you repainted all the units? Have you done exterior work? Have you done new parking lot and restriped everything? You know, you're going to be able to notice and see a lot of these things, but I also want to know what they've done, how much money they've spent, and where the money actually went. Because it's going to help me understand, okay, the roof was just replaced a year ago, so I'm probably not going to have to replace the roof for another 10 plus years. So we can throw that in the budget, but we can throw it in the budget for 10 years from now. Let's just make sure we have enough reserves set aside so that 10 years from now, we'll have enough capital to replace the roof, or we'll be in a position to do a refinance and pull out equity to be able to do so. If you're going to even hold on to it for that long. If you're not, and it's a 5-year flip, then it doesn't matter. Sweet. I don't even have to worry about the roof. We're going to sell it in 5 years anyway. So just understanding what all those capital improvements are is going to do nothing but help you understand what you need to do when you go in for your capital improvements. Sometimes pictures can work wonders, even just photos of everything, plus the list of capital improvements that they've done. Because you can take a look at it and say, okay, they did that, did that. Well, they said they did that, but that looks horrible. So we're going to have to go back in and redo that. They said they repainted this, and they said they did that, but that looks terrible. Did they actually do that? Or are they just saying they did that? Or do they hire a shoddy contractor who didn't even do it right? So sometimes when they show you the list of stuff that they've already done, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have to look at it, because it may not have been done up to par. Like we had a deal one time that we were looking at where we got the schedule of the CapEx that they've done. And it said that they had replaced the roof in the last like 12 months since when we were going to purchase it. And we had our third-party inspection company come and do their inspection on everything, including the roof. And then they were like, hey, like none of these roofs were put on properly. Like they're all shoddy. And we were like, oh, really? So then we let the seller know that none of the roofs were put on quite properly. And of course, the seller didn't know anything about that. So he went back and looked, and of course, they were all done incorrectly. And luckily, his roofs were under guarantee. So he was able to get that same roofer to come out and literally have to redo all those roofs for free. So something that if we had missed or just hadn't paid attention to because we saw that it was already done, we could have been screwed. Insurance declaration page. This is something that I'm not the primary insurance guy. I know a little bit about insurance. I know enough to be dangerous. But as far as a declaration page, like that's really just the page of what the actual policy really is. So more so than anything, that's the policy page. What is the current policy on the property? What are the liability limits? What is the deductible? What is the total premium? Is there an umbrella? What is the loss run history? So the first four is really going to be a lot of what's actually included in the policy itself. So I'd love to see what insurance policy they have now to know what they're paying, know the actual coverage that they're getting for what they're paying. Because when you get a T12, it doesn't tell you the coverage, right? It just tells you they're paying this for coverage. They're paying this level of premium. Okay, great. Man, maybe it's low. Maybe it's cheaper than what you're used to. Okay, was the coverage sucky? Like, do I need better coverage? So going in there and seeing what that actually looks like, deductibles as well, seeing if you're comfortable with that level of deductible. Because sometimes when you take over, sometimes you can take over the same insurance policy that's already on the property. You can just like re-up with the same company if you wanted to do that way. If it's a policy that you wanted to do, right? Or if not, then, maybe you need to shop it around or see if you could just up the coverage with the current company that's already insuring it. If you felt more comfortable that way, or reduce the coverage or whatever, right? And of course, liability limits will all be on there. And then any additional umbrella policy that they may or may not have. Same thing for, what was I about to say?
Josh, can I interject one little thing there for the insurance part? The exclusions. When you look at your declaration page, it is very important to look at the forms and endorsements. That is going to show you what's excluded and included on the policy. So if you are in a flood zone or an area that has earthquakes and things like that, you want to see if that's being covered, because a lot of times that's excluded on a policy, but there are carriers that will give you some coverage, but you want to make sure that you look at the forms to see what's included and what's not. Because let's say you have, a mold or bacteria in the walls you find, you need to see if that policy is going to cover that, if you have to put in a claim for that, because there could be an exclusion for that. So when you look at a declaration page, it's very important to look at the forms and endorsements, and that will tell you what's excluded and what's included.
Our insurance expert, Janelle, everybody. Thank you, Janelle.
No, you're welcome.
That definitely, again, I will tell you, I'm not the expert at insurance. So it's typically Reggie's wheelhouse is covering a lot of that. But like I said, I know enough to be dangerous. Same thing for the loss run history. I would just absolutely love to know if there's been a claim on this property. And if so, what was the claim? When was it? Who was the carrier that the claim was through? Did the premium get upped thereafter, or did they get non-renewed after that and there was a cancellation on the policy? What was the claim anyway? I would love to know if it's like a fire or if it's like a foundational problem, like holy smokes, did they fix the foundational problem? Or if it was just a fluke hurricane or tornado or something, what damage was done? Was the damage actually fixed properly? So once you get that loss run history, if you see that there was a loss somewhere, not only do you want to go and check and see like what the actual damage was, I want to know what was damaged, but then I want to go back and I want to check that CapEx improvement and I want to see, did they actually fix what needed to be fixed? Did they go back and fix it and was it fixed properly? So I'm going to want to pay extra attention to some of those things if there's been some kind of like major loss. And also on the loss run history, when I get that, I want to check and see, was it repaired at all? That not only do I want to know, was it repaired right? Was it repaired at all? But also, if it hasn't been paid out yet, if the loss was recently and the insurance claim hasn't actually paid out yet, is the seller wanting to withhold those funds? Like, are they wanting to keep the funds at closing? Let's say it's $500,000 the insurance company is going to pay out to repair, replace, whatever it is. Is the seller wanting to keep those funds and go run off and do their own thing? Or when I close, am I going to get the proceeds from the claim, since they're not going, the proceeds from the claim are designed to fix the property, not for them to pocket $500,000 and run away. So I want to make sure I'm actually going to be receiving that capital if they haven't already received it or already done anything with it, or vice versa. If they have already received it, but haven't done any of the maintenance yet, I would like to receive those proceeds at closing. So I would like to say that, hey, can you make sure that you just wire us that money, or we just reduce the purchase price, 500 grand, whatever we got to do to make a spade and make sure that I am going to get that chunk of money for whatever that claim was. Because if you haven't fixed it, then I have to fix it. So that's more work for me when I take over. So honestly, the discount should be even lesser than the actual claim payout if you're going to do a discount that way, I would say, because you're then having to do all the actual work. So that's worth more than just the $500,000 discount. So, but that, if something like that was to happen, I would definitely be retrading 100%. I'll be like, hey, look, you got $500,000 and you're considering not giving it to me. Like, no, not cool. We're going to have to either you give me that money, or I'm going to have to pay, multiple millions of dollars less for this asset for the now extra work I'm going to have to put into it to make it what I thought it already was, what you were telling me it already was. I'd love to get it from the last 5 years. Typically, the insurance carrier will have those loss runs for you if they've been insuring it for 5 years. If they haven't, then they'll give you as much as they have. Use that to the best of your ability. Inventory, permits for pools and spas. This is really just, do they actually have any permits for any hot tub or pool that they have? Now, obviously, this is going to be more for the Class A type of asset, although some Class B properties also have pools. So if they have one, do they actually have a permit to operate that, run that? Kind of the same thing for actually having the license. The business license, you need a permit for stuff like that. And then also, if they do have a pool or spa, what is the insurance coverage? Like, what's the additional liability coverage on top of maybe the standard because they have a pool or spa? It's typically a little bit higher premium if they know that you have a pool. Number 2, site vehicles include registration, description, etc. So if there's like a golf cart on site and it's just 300 unit property and the staff is riding around on golf carts all day and the maintenance guy is riding around on a side-by-side or a golf cart getting to and from what he's got to do, because it's like a 3-4 mile radius of how large the property is with how many units you got. What's included? Like, is that golf cart, is that side-by-side, is that vehicle of any sort going to be included with the transition when I buy it? Is that going to be a part of the inventory of the asset? And if so, I'm going to need all the registration for that vehicle, if it's even street legal. If it's not, then there's probably not any registration. Just the description of what it is so that I can have a detailed understanding of, this is the exact golf cart that I need to get. And you're not trying to do a quick switcheroo and give me a crappy golf cart when we close and you take the good one. I need to know exactly which one is going to be mine, right? Number 3, office inventory, equipment serial numbers. So what is portraying or conveying with the actual office? So they're going to keep all the furniture. Are all the desks going to stay? Are the computers going to stay? Are there laptops that are staying? Are there like big, giant, industrial size printers that are going to be staying? Is there just a small little tiny, home office printer that's staying? Is the Wi-Fi router staying? What's staying and what's not staying? Is like the external seating for tenants coming in and wanting to lease staying? Are you taking all the seating? Do you just want the table? What's actually going to be included, and then having them try to be as descriptive as possible in the inclusion of the inventory when they give you this list. Clubhouse inventory. So if there is a clubhouse, which is basically like an amenitized area. So for the clubhouse, this is something like if there's a gym. If there's a gym that's included, is everything in the gym coming with it? Are you trying to take the machines? Are you trying to take the dumbbells? Is there anything you're trying to take? The big TV on the wall, all the mirrors on the wall, want to look at yourself? I don't know. Is all that stuff coming with the purchase of the property? Other clubhouse things may be a pool table. Maybe there's a pool table in the clubhouse, or maybe there's a weird art all over the walls. That maybe you want the weird art. I don't know. Is that conveying? Is it staying decorated as it is now, or am I going to have to come in and redecorate, or have someone come in and redecorate the clubhouse? Maintenance shop inventory, same things, tools and supplies. This is typically a pretty big one. I'd love to know, are there the tools that are on site now going to stay there, or are those owned by the current maintenance tech who we're not keeping for, let's say, whatever reason, that I'm going to need to get new tools, or I'm just going to need to make sure that in my job application for my new maintenance tech, I make sure that he has his own tools if I didn't want to provide those tools, because tools are freaking expensive, let me tell you. And then supplies, same thing. So is there a bunch of windows and doors and doorknobs and locks and paint colors and paint brushes? Like, are there any supplies that are going to convey with the purchase? Or are you trying to take all the supplies for another deal or another asset that you have? If so, fine, whatever, take it. Just let me know, so I can make sure that I prepare and buy what we need to have on site for a lot of those little small piddly turn stuff like paint. Need to make sure we have the same paint colors. So I'm also wanting to know, as a part of the inventory, if the paint doesn't convey, what paint are on these walls. I don't want to buy the wrong color paint and then have to repaint an entire property because I suck and can't pick out the paint color. So what's the paint color, the shade, the sheen, all that good stuff. And yeah, let's stop beating a dead horse there. Maintenance shop inventory, amenity inventory. So that's part of what we were talking about with the gym. Maybe there's a business center. Maybe it's a fairly nice place and it's got a business center. Are the laptops and computers and printers and keyboards and mouses and everything, computer chairs and all that stuff coming with the business center? Any other amenity like a pool? Is there like one of those little lifeguard circular things? Like, is that coming with it? Or is there a bunch of pool sanitization equipment that's conveying with it, or a bunch of pool toys? Or is there a bunch of pool furniture outside? Yeah. Or a grill, and you got a bunch of propane. They bought a bunch of extra propane tanks because they've decided to go propane on the grill. Is that conveying with it? What else coming with it? Pool inventory, same thing. Unit appliance inventory. Most of the time, all of the acquisitions you're going to do on commercial real estate are going to include all of the appliances that are already there, but it's not always the case. Sometimes they say, yes, we actually include refrigerators and stoves at all of our units, but we don't include dishwashers and we don't include microwaves. So if you see a microwave or if you see a dishwasher in any of the units, we didn't install it. We technically don't own it. Technically, it doesn't convey. The tenant could take it with them when they leave. And then model and other inventory. So if there is a model unit, does the furniture stay? Is there like bowls and plates and stuff? Does that stay? What stays? What goes? Studies, any existing surveys? Because otherwise you're going to probably have to do your own survey for the lender, depending on the lender that you get. So I would love it if they already have a survey, because third-party reports are always the thing that's going to delay you. 100% of the time, that's going to be the delay you have in closing. Number 2, phase one final. If they have a phase 1, that's fantastic. If they don't, it's not the end of the world. But give me another third-party report that you have to get. Phase 2, if applicable. Phase 1 and phase 2, these are really environmental reports. So like if there's a old gas station or oil rig or whatever, like underneath the ground of the property that you're purchasing, if so, they're going to have to do not only a phase 1, but then once they determine that there was gas or there was some kind of environmental issue or additional restrictions, so to say, then they'll have to do a phase 2. Now, we've never bought a property that needed a phase two. Not many people are building apartment complexes on top of old gas stations, but you never know. So if they need a phase two and they already have it, great. If not, just an additional expense, an additional third-party report you're going to get. Same thing for an appraisal. Now, 9 times out of 10, the lender is going to want their own appraisal, even if there was an appraisal done like 30 days ago. It's the most annoying thing. Like, this appraisal could not be more relevant than right now. And they're like, I don't care. I want my own person to do the appraisal. So if they have one, great. It just helps you in determination of the actual valuation and cap rate too. The cap rate, if they have an appraisal that the appraiser actually like used, is going to be a great data point to use for your projections and your pro forma of where you believe cap rates are going to trend, whether that be worse or better, depending on where we are with the market, but especially with where we are today.
Hey, Josh, just a quick question for you and maybe the group on appraisals. I keep hearing, are you a proponent of a physical appraisal? I hear they're doing these virtual appraisals. Do you have faith in one versus the other? Do you care? What's your opinion and anyone from the group on one versus the other?
I would definitely much prefer a physical appraisal because you're just not going to get the same feel and vibe driving up and down the street, driving past the property, walking into the actual units, putting your eyes and your hands on the complex and feeling the integrity of different things. And it's, as far as the appraisal goes, I was much like hands down prefer that they come on site, because another thing that you may not know actually about appraisals is you can actually contest an appraisal. So after you get an appraisal back, you can go back to that appraiser and say, hey, here's why I think you're wrong. And here's why I think you need to readjust the appraisal you just gave this property. As long as you give true, verified, justified, good justification for whatever you're asking them, then they could potentially change it. Now, at the end of the day, they have the final say so because they're the appraiser with the license. But that's also, we really like on-site appraisals because I like to actually meet the appraiser, like on-site when they do their appraisal. So I can help explain to them what our business plan is. Because 9 times out of 10, when we meet the appraiser on site, when they do their appraisal, we typically get a higher appraisal than we otherwise would have got if we didn't. And it's because, one, we built rapport, which is massive. So then we have a lot of like verbal leverage for that, contesting piece I was just telling you about. But 2, their deeper understanding of what we're actually trying to do with the asset may actually play a role in where they believe the value of the property is, which is kind of ridiculous, right? It seems pretty ridiculous because the value is the value. It should be NOI, cap rate, and that's all they're using to determine value. But human beings are just so emotional. So I try to tie into that emotion and go connect with the appraiser and try to get as high of an appraisal as possible.
Hey, Josh, I had a quick question in regards to that appraisal. You said if there was one that was used, how long would you say you would use one from, like no more than 3 years ago, or?
That's way too long. No, if it's like more than 6 months old, it's probably old. You probably got to get another one. But again, what I'm saying, depending on the lender that you use, if you do owner financing, then none of it matters anyway. But I still would recommend getting an appraisal nonetheless.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But that lender is going to want to do another appraisal with their own third party or in-house appraiser. And sometimes we've had an appraiser that we've basically blacklisted. We're like, look, man, please don't send us that guy. I don't want Dave coming back to the freaking property because he gives us the lowest, most ridiculous values when we'll get, because one time we had him come and appraise when we were first getting started, one of our properties. And we were like, we just feel like this is really low. Okay. It just feels like this is not where it should be based on the assumptions that we had. But the appraiser is supposed to be the more knowledgeable one, right? They're supposed to be the one that's like the expert in the business. And that's why they got to take all the schooling and get the license. But I was like, we just didn't feel comfortable with it. So we got another appraisal for that asset. It was pretty small. It was one of the first deals we did, 42 units or 34 units. So it was only like, $2,000 or something more to just get another appraisal. So we got a different appraiser to come and appraise it. And he appraised it for like $1 million more than the other guy. And I was like, see, why are we dealing with this loser over here that doesn't know what the heck he's talking about? Because we could have tried to contest it with that guy, but he's just such a Such a
Yeah.
something. Anyway,
I had one other question in regards to that inventory. I didn't want to interrupt you. You were good going on a good stream there. Hey, so on that inventory, when someone sells a property and values their real estate, they're like, oh yeah, the value is like, I don't know, 1.5 million. Do you usually see them come back and say, oh, the selling price is higher because we forgot to include all those itemized assets?
no, I've never seen that before.
No, okay, just wanted to know.
But maybe that's just dependent on the class of property that you're buying. We've only ever bought one Class A property, and we didn't have that issue with that one, but maybe other Class A properties have that. Or maybe like high-end luxury 5-star hotels have that if you're trying to buy a hotel or something.
Okay.
But I've never had someone come back and be like, hey, I'm giving you them pool chairs, bro. That's an extra, $500,000 on the purchase price. Okay.
Awesome, thanks.
Soil tests may or may not matter. It depends on what you're actually trying to do with the property. If you're going to do any new development at all, even if it's a pre-existing asset, let's say you're buying it and there's another 5-10 acres somewhere, and you think you may want to do some more new development, build some more units, and just expand what you already have, getting those soil tests will help you determine whether or not how difficult it's going to be to build if you're going to decide to end up doing that. So if they already have a soil test, can't hurt to actually get that. Otherwise, if that's something you want to do, you'll have to get your own. Or if you're doing a straight up new development, you're buying just a vacant piece of land, then the soil test is 1,000% something you're going to want to get. Number 7, termite warranty. Do they have one? Depends on where you're at in the world, whether or not termites are a big problem and warranties are required. Termites are definitely an issue along the coast. So we always like to check and see if they have a termite warranty. Some places, if they weren't grandfathered into the warranty, then they don't even provide a warranty anymore. Like they don't actually warranty stuff. You just pay for their services and they help prevent it. And if it happens, there's literally nothing that they do for you other than come out and treat it again. So it kind of sucks. So you want to know if it is grandfathered in, freaking fantastic. I want the warranty. But if not, what is that cost going to be if you have to end up adding that in there? In terms that you can basically quantify that as a part of the pest control. So when you see us underwriting and we're saying, here's the cost for pest control, that's typically an inclusion of termite and other pests. Sometimes you have bee problems or wasp problems. We had one property that had this massive infestation of honeybees. I don't know what happened. It was just like all on the side of the building, literally thousands of honeybees. And what are you going to do with thousands of honeybees? You just get stung a million times and die, I guess. I don't know. So how do you get rid of it? We literally had to hire a professional beekeeper to come and get rid of the honeybees. Maybe it could have been an income source. I don't know. Maybe they would have paid us for coming and collecting the honeybees, but that wasn't how it was. We had to pay them. But anyway, termite warranty, structural inspection report. So do they have one? Probably not going to have one. I've rarely seen anyone have one. Depends on how new the build is. Even with the Class A property that we bought, which was built in 2013, even it just being 9 years old when we bought it, it didn't even have a structural inspection report. So if they have it, great. If not, most of the time, I've never heard lenders really requiring it. Same thing for drainage inspection report. If they have it, great. If not, no big deal. And then if there are any others, what are the other report that you're going to need? And you'll know, or you'll have someone tell you what that report is if you're going through some kind of a lender or something and they have certain requirements. That'll be easy for you to just convey. Otherwise, there shouldn't be anything else that you need, especially with pre-existing assets. Legal documents, rental control ordinances, if applicable. So like Section 8, HAP contracts, LIHTC deals. What are those ordinances? What, if any, what is the max allowable rent I can actually get with this being a low income housing tax credit deal or a HAP deal or Section 8? What is Section 8 actually paying out in this area? Because it's basically ever changing. Most of the time it changes every 6 months or every year, depending on where you are in the country. So for us, it's typically changing yearly, and they up it. This last year, they upped it about 8 to 10% more that Section 8 will pay. So whereas they were paying $900 max before for a 2-bed, 1-bath, no more than 1,000 square feet. The next following year, they upped it to what would that be? $990 if it was 10%. So now they'll pay up to $990 for the same 2-1 at no less than 1,000 square feet. So what are those actual restrictions? What are those regulations? And how is that going to affect your business plan based on whether or not you're actually going to accept Section 8, depending on where the property actually is, will depend on whether or not you're going to need to, really. And then on the flip side, if you have to, if it is a HAP contract deal or a LIHTC deal, what are those restrictions? Legal description, that's super simple. They should give you that actually in the purchase and sale agreement, or honestly, your attorney should be able to pull that up. But if not, then getting that can't help at all. Seller certification of property meeting all state and local codes. So are there any code violations that have happened? And a lot of times your title policy, the title company will pull that through the policy that they collect, or the title search that they do on the asset. They'll determine if there are any current codes being violated. But if not, then hopefully the seller will have some form of certification stating that the property is meeting all those codes. Because the last thing you want to do is not know that there's codes being violated by the property and then suddenly have to pay hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, because you violated these whatever ridiculous codes. Copies of zoning violations, if any. If you're looking to do any new construction or any new builds, what are the zoning violations? Or if you wanted to do some short-term rentals, like you wanted to turn some of the long-term rentals into short-term rentals, but found out that zoning didn't actually allow for that, or the local city didn't allow for that. Okay, now I know I can't do it, can't be a part of our business plan, need to pivot. So just what are those zoning restrictions? And the seller should have this information. But 9 times out of 10, they don't have it, or they're unwilling to give it to you. So this is something you typically have to go and get yourself, which isn't really that difficult. You just call the local city or the local municipality and ask about the specific zoning for that legal description property, right? And then any and all pending litigation. Hopefully there's no litigation, right? Hopefully there's no one being sued. But if there is, I need to know. And if you're not going to tell me to now, then I'm going to find out when the title does their search, and when I do more further due diligence, like I'm going to find out about it one way or another. You might as well tell me up front and be honest with me. Like we've got a property now that is in litigation. The property itself technically isn't in litigation, but we're in litigation because of the property. I may have told you guys the story before, but we won't go too deep into it. But basically we got sued because we had to evict 16 tenants because there was a flood, and they said they tried to sue us for wrongful eviction, but we won the case. But apparently there was 3 different cases, 3 different courts they took the case to. I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean, goes to show how much of a lawyer I'm not. So that we beat it in one court, we beat it in the second court, and I think we're like a week away from finalizing this last 3rd court litigation piece. It's just ridiculous. And it wasn't like Supreme Court and court justice. It wasn't like that. It was one court, but like 3 different names or type. I don't even know how to describe it. It was the same court, same judge, but it was like 3 different, not cases, because it was literally different, like courts. I don't know. It was weird. Anyway, litigation. You want to make sure you have all that. Construction documents. What's that?
I'm sorry, Josh, question. You can evict people. Wait, you evicted them because there was a flood in the building?
So all of the plumbing, I kid you not,
Okay.
all of the plumbing in the entire building is a building with 16 units, just
Okay.
decided to explode on itself, like inside
Okay.
the walls, not like the sink faucet had a leak, exploded.
Okay.
So we had a pretty bad flood. This was literally back in April, and we're still litigating, if that tells you anything.
Okay.
So we had to, they couldn't live in there. All their stuff is soaking
Right.
wet. All the walls are soaking wet. If the water got any worse before we had caught it and had the water mitigation company in there come and extract it, then all the electrical, like people would have been fried. They'd been standing in the water and the electrical circuits would have just fried them. So it just wasn't safe whatsoever to live in the unit anymore with all those issues. Because even after we mitigated the water, now we're going to have to
Okay.
go in and cut open all the walls, and people are going to be living in a construction zone with mold everywhere. Like, it just not sanitary, not safe. There was nothing good at all about that scenario. So
Okay.
we had to evict them due to, I think the lease that they had signed said that they were being evicted because of like a natural disaster or chaotic
Okay.
or something.
How
I don't
much
know.
notice in advance do you have to give for that?
We gave them like 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks notice. It wasn't a lot. I felt bad. Look, I
To
don't want to,
move, Josh, you gave these people 2 weeks to move out
Janelle,
of.
listen, I don't want to
Okay.
evict people
Okay.
that are good paying tenants just for the sake of evicting
Right.
people. But if
Right.
we didn't get in there and fix the problem in like less than 2 weeks, there would have been some serious mold problems.
Okay, so I understand that. So did they realize that they couldn't live in the units? Like, were you
Some of
going
them
to
did.
just okay?
Some of them realized it and took the payout that we gave them, because we basically said, hey, we're evicting you. We know that we can only give you such short notice. We know this is a terrible situation and a very unique situation. And we really hated
Okay.
it for our tenants that were good paying on time tenants. We were like, hey, we'll give you your security deposit back, and I will give you 1 month's rent back in cash if you sign this like waiver saying that, you're not going to sue us and that you will just leave and go out on your own terms. And out of the 16 tenants, we had 5 or 6 people take us up on our offer, take the money. It ended up
Okay.
being like, 2 or 3 grand a piece. Take the money and go, which is enough money to go get another deposit somewhere and move and live somewhere else.
Okay.
And then the other tenants just weren't having it. They wanted to raise an uproar. So they called the news channel. The news channel
Oh,
showed
oh
up,
wow.
which brought the mayor.
Oh wow.
And the mayor showed up, and now it's all over the news with the mayor. I got a personal call from the mayor. It was this whole big ordeal. It
Okay,
was
so
literally
going for
like,
I mean, go ahead.
it was literally a full on like litigation thing where I had to, and I never had to do this before, so it felt weird, but I had to be like, no further comment. You have to talk to my attorney kind of thing. And I was
Okay.
like, this is just, I feel so weird saying this, but if y'all are really trying to be this way, then that was basically what our attorneys told us to say. Like, don't say anything. We'll handle it.
Okay, so going forward, you can put that in the lease. Is that something that we should specify in our lease to say if there's some sort of natural disaster and we have to evict you, like we need to make sure that's in the lease. Because I didn't know something like that could be placed in a lease.
Yeah, basically it states that it's just a cancellation of the lease, which is
Okay.
basically eviction. So
Okay.
technically we didn't file for eviction. There's not an eviction on their
Right.
record anywhere. It's just that, hey, you got to leave. Sorry, you can't stay.
Okay.
Happy to help you get your stuff out. We hired a crew to help people like move their stuff, what they wanted to move that wasn't like sopping wet.
Right.
But this is the best we can do. Like, we got to get in these units and we got to fix them up and get them back rented as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
all
Okay.
of that should be included. If you have a good property manager, all that should be included in their like baseline, most basic lease. And if it's not,
Okay.
making sure that it is included in there, which will go back to what you may have missed when we were talking about making sure you get a copy of all the current leases and like what's actually
Good.
in the lease.
Perfect. Okay. That is something I'm going to look for now. I didn't know that that's something that should be in it, but good. Thank you.
You never know until it happens to you. It's been
Exactly.
a never ending learning journey through this process. Let me tell you.
Wow.
Construction documents, copies of certificates of occupancy. So when this says construction documents and certificate of occupancy, this is stating that if this is going to be a brand new build, or if it is a brand new build and you're buying a brand new property, or if this is going to be even outside of like quantifying these as construction documents, even if the property already is at 90% occupancy, and you're going to want to go with some kind of agency lender who's going to require it to remain at 90% occupancy, then I want to get a certificate of occupancy from the seller stating that it's at 90%. And on top of that, I want to make sure that I put something in the purchase and sale agreement that states that the seller is, by law withheld to keep the property at least 90% occupancy throughout however many months up until the closing date. Because if you dip below 90%, then you're not going to be able to close the deal if you're trying to go with something like agency, because the lender is just going to say, sorry, you're not stabilized, can't lend to you. And then you don't close, which sucks for you because you wasted a bunch of money and wasted a bunch of time. And then it equally sucks for the seller because now they've just went through this whole process and they don't get to make any money. So it behooves them to sign that, agree to that, and actually uphold their end of the bargain to make sure that you can close. Copy of original building plans and specs. Most of the time, this isn't the case, especially if you're buying BDC class assets. You're not getting original building plans or blueprints and specs. But if they have those, that is going to be nothing but massively beneficial for you, because you're going to get to see in all the walls. You're going to get to see the deep detailed blueprints of the actual construction layout of everything. So if you have to do anything inside the walls, instead of just cutting holes in the walls and looking in there and being like, oh, this is over here, and oh, I should have cut the hole over there, and let's cut this hole now, and you're just like damaging up the whole unit. Instead of going through all that chaos, you have a blueprint that literally tells you exactly where everything is, so you can cut your little tiny hole or whatever you need to do, and fix whatever you got to fix without having to cause such havoc. It'll also give you the deep detailed information of, everything, right? Amperage for your circuit breaker panels. The layout of the like inside the walls, which may help you determine whether or not you want to do, if there's not already like in unit washer and dryer, may help you determine if you want to do that. And if so, how are you going to actually, route the exhaust for the dryer outside? How are you going to run the new plumbing for the water? What are you going to tie into? Where do you have to cut? Where do you have to go to tie that in there? Where's the best place to locate that in the unit? It's nothing but massively beneficial to have all that without having to do all of the annihilation of a unit to find out that info if there isn't plans. Copy of all warranties. If there are warranties, I 1000% want to know everything that is warranted. Is the roof warranted? Is there a warranty on the pools? Is there a warranty on the landscaping? Is there a warranty on paint? Is there a warranty on the appliances that you just bought? Is there a warranty on the flooring that you just had put in all these units? Is there a warranty on the kitchen cabinet you just had installed? If so, I want to know what those warranties are. I want to know the contact information of who is warranting them, so I know who I need to call if there's a problem. Site map with unit numbers. So I would, if they have it, be fantastic. It's going to help a lot with marketing, which I think we've already talked about. I told you guys there's going to be some slight repetitiveness in here. I think we already talked about site map somewhere. But anyway,
just for thinking about on the other side of this, right? We're talking about the acquisition, but when we think about the exit, once you acquire and accumulate all these documents that we're talking about, where do you keep those for every property? Is there one singular place that you keep them so that when someone asks for these, when you're selling it to them, that you can just furnish them?
Yeah, we just digitize everything. Everything's got to be digital because it makes it simple for everybody's life. So once they're all digitized, we just put it in a Google Drive document. We're just Google people, so we use Google Drives for a lot of what we do, and we'll create a Google Drive for that specific asset or that entity, and then we'll have a separate folder inside that drive that says whatever, like due diligence docs or something. So if we need to reference anything, we can easily click in there and see it all. It's a pretty big doc. if you can imagine. There's a lot that goes into due diligence. Contracts and service agreements. This is the last bit. We may actually get through it. We're just going to kind of blow through this, I suppose. So landscaping, these are just all the different kind of contracts and service agreements you want to get. So this goes back to what we were talking about when we said you wanted to get the list of service agreements, wherever that was. That was somewhere. Anyway, getting all the list of service agreements, and I was giving some examples. Well, here's 40 examples. Landscaping, landlord utility agreement, sweeping service. I've never seen a sweeping service, but you never know. Snow removal, chimney cleaning, pest control, vending machines, coin operated laundry, in-unit washer and dryer rentals. We've done that before too. Additional revenue source. Alarm monitoring, courtesy security patrol, cable TV, telephone contract, high-speed internet, payphone contract, pool service, pager service, answering service, telephone equipment service, eviction service, credit screening service, chamber of commerce, local multifamily association, locator service, furniture rental units, furniture rental clubhouse, yellow page listing, copier service and or maintenance contract, advertising contract, business permit, privilege license, alarm permit, brochure, printing vendor, apartment turnkey agreements, apartment painting agreements, apartment carpet agreements, fire department inspections, plant maintenance, software license, furniture options, and hospitality service. As you can tell, there's a lot of potential service agreements that could be had. So really, you're just going to ask them for all their service agreements. Or again, to make it super simple, just send in this list That way they can look through here and be like, have that, don't have that, don't have that, have that, and they continue what they have and tell you what they don't have. That's it, fellas and ladies. That is the due diligence checklist for making sure you get all your stuff done. So you got about 20 minutes left. So you don't have any questions? It was a lot, I know.
That was a lot.
Paul, I see you had a question in here. Did I already answer this question?
Yeah, you answered it. I asked earlier.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey Josh, I have a question, but it's not on that. It's on the perpetuity model. So maybe
That's
I'll
fine. What do you
like-
got?
Okay. So I have two questions actually. The first one is so let's say you do the 70-30 split and then there's the inversion,
Mhm.
right? How does that work realistically speaking from a grant deed standpoint? Like how can you own first 30% and then at some point you own 70%? How do you just re-record the grant deed, or like how does that work for the percentage of ownership?
So the deed itself just states that whatever entity I've created for the purchase of that asset is going to own 100% of the deal. Like it's just going to be one LLC that owns 100%. Then there's going to be your operating agreement, or more specifically as a syndication, your SEC docs, PPM, all that stuff. And that's going to give you all the deep detailed description of that 70-30 split. So it's going to be in those documents. There's never going to be any shift or adjusting of the deed. It's going to be in those SEC docs that it's going to deeply and intuitively describe the shift in the model of initially having 30% and shifting to 70%. Now, the thing that makes it really easy for us, or just for the perpetuity model in general, is that we're not actually changing any equity. So technically, everything stays the same in the sense that the LPs get to keep their 70% pro rata share of equity that they bought in. I'm never going to change their K1. I'm never going to change to say that they suddenly own less of the asset. So all their depreciation benefits and their net worth, if they care about it, they're going to get to keep for the life of the deal. The only thing shifting is the actual cash put off by the property. So the way that it's structured in the PPM is as if it's like a waterfall. So it basically states that once investors receive 100% of their capital back, then there's a waterfall that then switches all of the cash flow favoring 70% to the general partners or the Class B investors, however it's worded in the document. And then the other 30% going to the limited partners or the Class A investors. And then it'll say in perpetuity, like for however long we hold on to the asset, and including any and all cash events like refinances and sales and just, standard monthly and annual cash flow.
So then in that case, for a sale or refi, do they have 70% or they have 30?
They have 30.
But
They already got 100% of their money back. So they have no more skin in the game, no more basis. And you've permanently waterfalled. We just call it an inversion because it's exactly what it is. Their cash to receiving 30% instead of 70%. And that goes for every capital cash transaction of the asset.
Okay, but you said, so the only part that's a bit confusing is you said they keep their 70%, but you mean their basis is still 70%, basically.
Yeah. What I mean by equity is anything on paper. So the K1s that they're going to receive every year from our CPAs are going to state that they own the same amount of equity, the same share that they initially bought in, which is going to give them that same depreciable benefit every year. But the actual cash I'm going to be giving them is going to be 30% pro rata of their buy-in after they get 100% of their capital back.
Okay, I see. And that's the same thing for final sale of the asset. They will only get 30%.
GPs will still remain 70% for that.
Cool. Great. Thanks for that. And then my second question on that topic is for, if I understand correctly, with this model, you return all their capital plus pref equity or preferred return sometimes.
Yeah. So the preferred return should have been paid, depending on how we've structured it. It should be paid out every year, every quarter, technically.
Is it possible to do the structure without paying any return? You just say, hey guys, I'll pay you all your money back, and then 50-50 or 70-30, but without offering a return, or would that not be typical at all?
I mean, the model that we do already isn't very typical. as far as the creativity aspect, it's definitely something different, but it's going to be a hard sell. I mean, if I'm a passive investor and you're like, hey, give me 100 grand, I'll give you nothing for 3 years. I'll give you your money back. And then I'll take 50% or 70% of the deal. I'm gonna be like, I don't know if I like that. So I'm gonna want some kind of growth of my cash, which is why we typically have the preferred return in there. Now you don't have to quantify it as a preferred return. You can make the preferred return lower and then just shoot for getting like making more and having a waterfall structure like we did with the RV park. So with the RV park, because typically we do a 10% preferred return, but with the RV, we did 7%. So it's 7% on the face level. It looks like, oh, well, I'm going to make less on this deal, but that's not necessarily true because the projections still show that we could potentially pay out 10%. Now, we didn't want to project that because we don't really know, especially since it's a new build. But the projections showed that we could potentially actually pay out 10%. And so if that's the case, after they get their 7% back, they're still going to get an extra 3% or whatever they get, whatever excess cash flow that we have. But at that point, it's going to be like, it's going to be a 60-40 split because that's what we did with that one. So 60% to the LPs, 40% to the GPs. And so I'm actually going to start to get some money instead of waiting for them to get 100% of their money back before I get a dime, because that's how we usually have done the perpetuity model in the past. So I actually get paid some for overperforming instead of having such a high barrier of, being able to produce anything, which hindsight's 2020. That's how we structure it. That's how we structured it. But my recommendation would be, if you're going to do it yourself, would be to try to include some form of a waterfall structure so that you can get paid something outside of the acquisition fee. You can get paid something over the course of that, 2-3 year time frame before you hit the refi.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I've been also spending quite a bit of time trying to understand your perpetuity model. I read your PPM today on Chase Park, which I guess was still your old perpetuity. So that one did differ, seemingly to me, it did differ in quite a bit of aspects from a general waterfall. I think Oliver's first question, with the ownership and the deed, you can kind of ask that on any waterfall. If it says, the first 10% is a pref and it's going to the LPs, and then up to 15% IRR, it's a 70-30 split. And then above that, it's a 60-40. Where's the ownership? It's not like you're changing the ownership. It's just how the LLC is distributing its funds that it has. But I guess that the perpetuity model is the same thing. And you could kind of, simplify it by to me at first, it seemed like you're kind of telling them, here, lend me the money for 3 years at this interest rate, and I'll give it back to you after 3 years. The benefit of you doing is not only the interest rate, you're getting, a bigger piece of the pie in terms of the K1s, and you're getting lifetime, some payments later on from the cash flow. But yeah, I don't know. It's a
dividends.
What?
Lifetime dividends. Yeah, it's
lifetime dividends. It's quite an interesting
security aspect of it. So the waterfall structure there is really where you get in deep of the fact that this is a security that you're providing, and how is the actual security itself, or the fund, or the LLC treating the capital. That's really what your SEC docs are utilizing. Of once you reach certain hurdles or thresholds, how is the capital distributed amongst the partners? And you can honestly do the same exact thing with like a business partnership if you wanted to. You can structure anything however the heck you want to structure it. You can get as creative as you possibly want to get. And if you guys haven't been able to tell up to this point, I do really enjoy creativity. There's so many different ways to do things. And if you can do things just a little bit more creative than the next guy, and that one helps you stand out, but two helps you really change your life much faster than the standard guy, why not go, against the grain and go that route? So I think you're right. That's basically how it's structured.
Right. Yeah. The only drawback that I did see was, I guess, what you're changing now was it kind of seemed like, if I'm like, there was the plan for, if you're making 10% cash on cash, it's going to the LPs. But what if you're making 15% cash on cash? It seemed like from the videos, you were just holding that 5%, to when you can bring them 100% to the table. So
Yeah.
that was like a little bit of a, I didn't really like that. Like there's extra funds this year, it
So-
raises the IRR and all, I mean, that's the whole point of IRR, don't wait 2-3 years to distribute the funds. There's funds,
Well,
Um,
for the way that we structured it, we basically said anything over and above 10% was going to go towards like return of member capital.
right.
So if we had distributed it, then let's say they invested $100,000 and I gave them 15% in the first year, they get their 10%, the extra 5% goes towards their 100K. Now they only have 95K in the deal. The second year when they get their pref, they're only getting $9,500 instead of 10,000. Now they're all confused. I thought it was 10,000. Why are you paying me less? And they get all butthurt and they're like, well, I wish you wouldn't have paid me my money back because I would rather have it in the deal working for me and continuously getting my 10%. So it's like creates confusion. People don't understand it. So we always hold it back if we're going to be utilizing it as a payback of principal, just to keep things simplified. But with what you're saying, we realized fairly quickly that we didn't like just holding the capital back. So instead of utilizing it as a payback of member capital, we decided to implement the waterfall structure. And that way, not only do they make extra money on top of any pref that we make, but we're also incentivized to, overperform so that we can get paid as well and not have to wait 2 to 3 years before we can see a dime of cash from the deal.
Right. If I may say, by now I think you've watered down your perpetuity model a little bit. Not going to be a knock on, the creativity side of it, but the biggest change is that you're open, I believe, to besides, other syndicators are like, we're going to sell the asset in a 5-year. They build out a 5-year model. Let's sell it. And you're like, no, let's just hold it. Keep on refinancing. We'll stay partners for as long as we hold it. And that's pretty much it. But, you put yourself quite a hefty promo into your waterfall where then you're ending up at 70%, which maybe some, other syndicators only end up at like 50%. So you've done that, you put in like a real hefty 70%. But yeah, I just the openness to be a partner for much longer and then tell them you'll be making cash out of something you don't have a dollar in for years to come.
They typically end up being repeat investors at that point. We're actually getting ready to complete our first successful perpetuity refinance, hopefully within the next 1 to 2 weeks. Freaking ridiculous how long it's taken to finish this refi. But once we do, that'll be the first taste. Now it's the smallest deal we have. It's only 34 units, so it's not going to pay out nearly as much as any of the rest of our large deals. But nonetheless, 70% of a decent, like still going to be a decent amount of money. So I'm still excited to see that inversion happen, start to see some more like legitimate higher end, passive income from one of our assets. And then of course, all those investors, can I have it? Is that what you're saying? Can you have the capital or can you have the deal?
Can I have the capital since you said it's not a lot? Just throw it into my account.
I was thinking the same thing.
I forgot what I was saying. Anyway, yeah, we're finally get to doing. Once we finish the refi, then once we give them all their capital back, and I think another thing we like about such a quick return of their initial investment is that they're very incentivized to want to just reinvest. So it's a great way to rinse and repeat investors and build scale into your business model.
So I have a question, Josh. Obviously, I just got started this week, and Oliver brought up something in regards to your perpetuity model. So I guess, and I haven't gone through all the slides and all the decks that you sent, but so let me just wrap my brain around this just to make sure I understand what Oliver was talking about in your model and what you're doing. So obviously we say, okay, you're going to get a 7 or 10% return paid out quarterly. And then after the 3 to 5 year hold period, if you structured it, 70% goes to the LPs in the beginning. After the refi at the 3 to 5 year, you invert it and now you're the 70% receiver and then they're the 30%.
Correct.
Very sexy.
Yeah, it's something that I can't take all the credit for coming up with it, but it is something that we found. We brought a KP on our third deal we ever did, which was the largest deal we had done to date. The largest deal we had done up to that point was 42 units, and then we were buying 148 units. We were like, oh snap, this is pretty big. Don't really quite meet the qualifications for the loan on this one. So we brought in a KP, and it was our KP that recommended the longer term model and
Yeah.
the inversion of cash flows. And I was like, what LP is going to be interested in giving me 70% of the deal? Like, I find that to be a really hard sell.
But I think
But
I think
yeah,
you said it because they got all their money back and then they got their yield on a quarterly basis.
yeah, I mean, obviously now I'm a massive proponent of it, and so are a lot of our investors. But
Yeah.
initially, I just thought it was kind of wild. But in case you guys haven't found out yet, I like wild. So pretty good.
I had one question, and again, I think I was kind of dancing. I tiptoed around it earlier when you and I had a conversation, but I was mentioning like when I open up an account, let's say a business account, I've been trying to interview these different lenders in my area, small regional lenders as well as credit unions. And a lot of them are asking, hey, you know what, if your LPs are going to own more than 20%, then we're going to need all of their information and their financial statements. And I was like, well, I don't want to give you all of their information. I'm trying.
Yeah.
How does, if you could just kind of give a quick intro on what your thoughts are on
Yeah,
that.
so I don't know if you've ever seen any of the other, like just any investor portal or any investor doc anywhere, but oftentimes you'll see that there's actually both a minimum and a maximum investment. And the maximum investment is like up typically about 19% of the total, allotted deal amount, so that they don't reach the 20% threshold and you don't have to include them and get all their documentation.
Okay.
So that's typically. And what you could do if you had an investor, like you didn't want them to have to do that, or they didn't want to do that, but they wanted to invest more than the maximum, is probably more often than not. Now, this may not be the case, but more often than not, they probably have an entity. So they can invest in their personal name with 19%, then they can invest in an entity with 19%. And then it's technically not one person owning
Okay.
20%.
Well, what I did find was one of the credit unions said anything because I asked her, I said, okay, well, let me give you a scenario. I said, if we buying a $2 million property and we raise $1 million, that's basically only 50% LTV. So she's like, anything under 65% loan to value, no one has to be the guarantor. They'll just look at the cash flow on that property. And I'm like, all right, now we're talking. So, and then she said, and again, another person said, yeah, as long as it's less than 60% loan to value, then we won't need, even if they're 20% owner, we won't need their information, or we'll just guarantor just based off of the general partner and stuff of that sort. So I was like, okay, I'm confused. So, but I like what you said on the 19%. So that means the GP is obviously the larger shareholder, even though we're saying it's 70-30.
Well, the GP is just the GP. Like, someone has to be the guarantor. And so you as the GP are signing up to be that guarantor, unless you don't meet those requirements. And in which case, like I was stating, you bring in someone called a KP, which is just a key principal partner who meets any net worth or liquidity requirements that you don't, that can sign the dotted line, and you give them a slice of the GP pie for it.
I see. Okay, good. Okay, that helps big time. Thank you.
So if you're trying to close like a $30 million deal and you're like, I don't even come close to that, then you find someone who does, who can, you give them 5 to 10% of the total GP equity out of the 30%. So it's 5 to 10% of 100%, and that 100% is out of the 30%. So it actually ends up being lesser than 5 to 10%, because then it becomes 5 to 10% of 30%.
Yeah.
Nonetheless.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to have these questions answered.
Cool. We probably got time for one more question if anyone has anything. Marcus, you look like you're itching to ask questions.
Yeah, so I do got an interesting questions along those same lines when you're talking to potential lenders, especially when you got maybe deals that might be bigger deals, and start talking through that. They're always asking you get better rates if you show more experience on the acquisition team or the sponsorship side. Just thoughts on how to manage that. Again, I'm like Paul, I'm working through some of the resources of the weeks I missed. Is that a part of this mastermind? Do we get Josh on our documents as a senior advisor with his thousands of units under his belt? Like, how does, I hear that, I keep hearing that, I keep seeing you get better rates as a result of that, or better terms as a result of that. What is everyone's experience and how do you maybe leverage that or work around that?
So it's a possibility. It's definitely an option for me to partner with any of you guys and help you out on a deal if you need it, as long as it makes sense for all parties, right? But if it doesn't, then I've got a plethora of people I can connect you with who could be a KP, like who could have much more experience and money than me, who may even be a better KP than me. But honestly, I don't know that I've had a conversation with a bank and they've told us that our rate would be better if we had more experience. I think more so than anything, it may be that our rate would be better if there's going to be some kind of personal guarantee and we have a crap ton of like personal liquidity. Maybe that I've seen before be something that they're like, oh, wow, you got $2 million liquid in your own personal bank account and you're personally guaranteeing this and you're only buying this, $1 billion property or whatever it is. They're like, you've got double the value of this asset. 100%. I'm willing to give you a great rate. But I don't know that I've seen like, hey, yeah, my track record's fantastic. Give me a lower interest rate. It's really a lot of it, depending on the loan that you get, also kind of flows in with where that'll fall in line. And with local banks too, it really, at the end of the day, for us, what it's come down to is our personal relationship with them. Like not even necessarily track record, but just like, hey, we've closed many deals with you guys now at this point. So they know we can close. They know we're serious. They've seen our financials 100 times. We don't even have to like continue to give them our information because it's the same every time, or it's updated when we close a new deal. And so our contact at that local bank can get us a quote like super fast on what he thinks. And I don't know that it's more favorable because of our experience, but it very well could be. And maybe that's just a local bank thing and not necessarily an agency or institutionalized thing. Maybe that would make more sense if you're talking about a local bank. If you're talking about an institution or an agency, they're typically following really strict guidelines of where their rates are going to be anyway. And they're not looking so much at your experience as much as they are the market or that asset.
Fair enough. Thank you.
I definitely know hard money lenders, they give you better rates depending on experience, but that's more like for fix and flips, things like that. It's a bit different.
Do any of you guys have a line of credit? It's the last thing I'll say before we jump off. Now, lines of credit are freaking fantastic. Depends on how you use it, right? So if you don't have a lot of capital right now, and I heard this from a guy I interviewed a guy on my podcast, and he was telling me about this. This is a model he used, and I was just blown away. I went and did it the very next day. He told me he had this really creative strategy, right, on how he was able to stay liquid and do more deals without really needing to utilize his own capital. So what he did is he went out and got a line of credit. He got approved for an unsecured line of credit for $200,000. So it's unsecured. So it's not like there's any, he's not having to collateralize it. And because it's unsecured, he doesn't even have to pay anything on the loan. Now, it depends on the unsecured loan that you get. The one that I got, I have to pay like interest on it. I have to pay any principal. But if I pull on it, I have to pay whatever the interest is, which even if the interest is 10%, it's like nominal. It's like $100 a month. Or whatever your amount would be, depending on how much you pull out. Anyway, let's say you just have to pay interest. So you get a $200,000 line of credit, you pull out the full 200 grand, you use that as your liquidity to close deals, and honestly, potentially even invest passively. Because what he did was he got this unsecured line of debt at 200,000 that he got, or line of credit. It was a 5-year revolving term. So since it was 5 years revolving, once he pulled the money out, the 200 grand, he didn't owe it back for 5 years. So he could take that 200 grand, invest it literally, like he didn't even have to be a GP. He could have just invested that passively in a deal, paid his measly couple $100, if any, that he owed on a monthly basis for pulling the money out. Let the money keep working for him, because the interest rate he got it at, of course, it was a better interest rate environment when he did it. He got it at like a 2.5% interest rate. So he had $200,000 at 2.5%, pulled it out, and then would invest in deals that paid out like 10, 12%, keep the delta, right? And then potentially he would, if he invested passively in someone else's deal or in his own deal, then when it would refi and he would get the money back, or when it would sell and he would double his money, now he's doubled his money and he takes that money and does whatever he wants with it. So it was super cool. And I was like, I've never even thought to get a line of credit for that, and especially unsecured. I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. He's like, yeah, man. And then 5-year revolving terms. I just take this cash, keep rinsing and repeating, closing deals, making things happen. He's like, I don't even have to use my own money. Like, this money has been rinsed and repeated for years. And even at the 5th year, when it's all said and done, he has to pay it back. He just pays the 200 grand back and then pulls it right back out and starts back over 5 more years. Like, it's just none of his own money at a really low interest rate, and he can just keep rinsing and repeating.
Josh, Eli asked a great question. Which episode was that? We can listen to it.
I think it was 216.
216.
Let me confirm before everybody writes that down and listens to the wrong episode.
There now again. So as I mentioned last week or earlier on Monday, so I'm a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. So there's other things you can do as well. So like if you have a brokerage account, sometimes you can get a line of credit against your brokerage account up to about sometimes 70% of that value. And that's interest only. So instead of liquidating a $200,000 brokerage account and you're paying capital gains tax from any of that growth, you could get a line of credit, usually interest only, and then do whatever you want. It just don't allow you to buy more stock with it. But you could also use that. There's no underwriting involved with that. We offered something like that at JP Morgan as well. You just couldn't borrow against a retirement account. So that's something you could look at.
So it's episode 214. I told you guys wrong.
214.
214 with Bronson Hill.
So
But yeah, the very next day after having that interview, I went out and talked to my local bank connection that we have, that we use. And the revolving line for him wasn't 5 years. It was like 2 years or something. And I was like, whatever. I guess I wasn't really thinking about using this cash for passive investments anyhow. And of course, the interest rate wasn't that great. It was like prime, which is 7%. But nonetheless, I put it together anyway, because I'm like, you never know when you may need money anyhow. So at least it's sitting there, and it only cost me like $200 a year just to have it. And then you don't have to pay a dime on it if you're not using it. And if you pull on it, then it's there. So I got me a $200,000 line of credit and was like, if I need it, it's there. And even at 7%, if I invest into a deal that pays 10, I'm still making money. Or if I just use it as extra liquidity to close more deals, then that's great too. So line of credit was a great move, and I can't believe I had never thought about it before. So now you guys all know about it, and you can go try to listen to the detailed episode and go do it yourself.
Rock and roll. Thank you.
A month ago, I got a 400 grand HELOC out of my primary residence, and I don't intend to use the cash, but it's a pretty sizable amount that I can use just for liquidities, just show liquidities. And I was told by lenders that they actually accept HELOC money as liquidities. So it's pretty cool. I don't need to use it, but it's there,
Sweet. Whatever you got to do, man. There's so many options out there. All right, guys. Have a great night. I'll see you on Monday.